Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. From One King West Hotel in downtown Toronto, welcome to the Empire Club of Canada. For those of you just joining us through either our webcast or our podcast, welcome to the meeting. Before our distinguished speaker is introduced to you today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our head table guests. I would ask each guest to rise for a brief moment and be seated as your name is called. I would ask the audience refrain from applause until all the head table guests have been introduced. Head table guest, Mr. Jorge Araya, President and Chief Executive Officer, Imperial Tobacco Canada. Ms. Deborah Glendinning, Partner, Osler, Hoskins and Harcourt. Mr. Gordon McIver, Past President, Empire Club of Canada. Ms. M.J. Perry, PhD student in theology, owner of Mr. Discount Limited and Director, Empire Club of Canada. Mr. Mike Eppel, Senior Business Editor, 680 News. Mr. Craig Lockwood, Partner, Osler, Hoskins and Harcourt. And my name is Barbara Jessen of Jessen & Company Communications and the President of the Empire Club of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, your head table guests. There's an elephant in the room with us today, and believe me, have I heard about it. Our guest speaker today is the President and CEO of Imperial Tobacco Canada, part of the British American Tobacco, the world's largest tobacco company. We all know that smoking tobacco products, specifically cigarettes, carries with it a very serious health risk. Even among Western nations, tobacco-related health issues remain the leading cause of death. Before we announced that we would bring today's speaker to our podium, the very possibility stirred some significant controversy with our board. So first, let me state very clearly that the Board of Directors of the Empire Club of Canada, and most certainly its President, does not endorse or support the sale of cigarettes or other tobacco products that are ignitable. So why have we agreed to give a voice to our speaker today? As we debated this internally, support came from a surprising quarter, the most outspoken advocate for social issues on our board. She argued very persuasively that the pendulum on freedom of speech for controversial issues has swung too far and that we should at least be prepared to listen. Today, the Western world has taken aggressive steps to curtail the marketing of tobacco products. In Canada, daily and occasional smokers accounted for 17.7% of the population over age 12 in 2015. In 2000, that number was 26%. However, many Asian and third world countries do not yet have legislation or policies in place to protect their citizens from smoking, and nearly 80% of the 1 billion smokers worldwide live in low to middle income countries. Still, there's some light in all of this. The World Health Organization initiatives seem to have had some success globally over the past decade. Smoking worldwide has modestly declined, and happily the biggest change is among young people, where we will see the most significant health benefits. And tobacco companies, too, have begun to change. In the past, we know that some companies went to extreme lengths to suppress mounting scientific research about the perils of smoking. Today, at the very least, they are more transparent. Many, including the company before us today, lead the research on non-combustible tobacco products. Both the UK Department of Health and the FDA now support innovations in tobacco, particularly new non-combustible tobacco products. As things stand, e-cigarettes containing nicotine cannot be legally manufactured, sold, or imported in Canada, but as I understand it, the Canadian Lung Association is currently updating their position statement based on new scientific evidence. After much debate and considering all of this, in the end it fell to me to make the final decision on including our speaker today at our podium. This is how I see it. British American Tobacco is a public company with obligations to shareholders. It will not be the first or the last company compelled to reinvent itself or its products, and there are suggestions that at least one tobacco company will be completely out of the cigarette business within the decade. The example I best like to cite is the Berkshire Hathaway case, which started out as a textile manufacturing company. In 1962, Warren Buffett began buying into it after noticing a pattern in the price direction of its stock whenever the company closed a mill. Eventually, Buffett had to acknowledge that the textile business was waning and the company's financial situation was not going to improve. And the rest, as they say, is history. So this is where I netted out. Our guest company is changing, and if we want to encourage that change, we should show courtesy and listen. To this, we added one final caveat. Our guest speaker would have to agree to an interview format whereby he is held accountable by one of Canada's leading journalists. I must say to his credit, he didn't shy away from this. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Mr. Jorge Araya, President and CEO of Imperial Tobacco Canada, who has worked with British American Tobacco since 1995. He has been a leader in their portfolio evolution and contributes to the transformation of this complex and often controversial business. His interrogator is Mike Eppel, who has a track record of reporting on financial markets and corporate news for more than 25 years. He is currently with 680 News, Toronto's leading all-news radio station. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you to everyone who's in attendance this afternoon. I understand that you have sort of an opening statement that you wanted to give a little bit about the state of the tobacco industry right now, and then we'll get into the finer points of the debate about so many things, whether it is tobacco or e-cigarettes or even the forthcoming marijuana legalization. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, it's not that we have enough controversy with cigarettes. We can talk about marijuana. Yeah, thank you very much. Barbara, thank you very much for the kind introduction and most importantly, for opening the doors. I know we're a very controversial industry, and we really appreciate the openness. We really appreciate the debate that you guys had, and that you finally allowed us to say a few words here. So thank you very much. I would like to thank the club for continuing to provide the opportunity for diverse viewpoints to be heard and discussed. To this point, we're certainly a very contentious industry, and let me be very clear. There are important health risks about smoking. Smoking is a cause of serious and several diseases, and the only way to be safe is not to smoke. So I'm the first one to say that, and I want to make it very clear. But still, it is a reality. There are roughly 5 million adult Canadians who smoke. They're fully aware of the risks of smoking, but they continue to smoke. And while we believe they should decide from themselves whether or not they smoke, we also think that they should have less risky products available to them. This is why we're launching what we call a sort of a revolution, which are these less risky alternatives. These are products that have fewer toxicants and that offer potential public health benefits. We believe that we have a strong proposal that will benefit consumers, governments, and society in general. This is the result of billions of dollars spent on research and development, which has produced commercially viable products that are significantly less risky than traditional cigarettes. And I want to be clear. We want, like I was mentioning at the opening, we want our consumers to migrate from traditional cigarettes to these new reduced harm products. But this migration will also require regulations that incentivize consumers to make the switch. Success will not be the result of regulations that benefit the producers of cheap contraband tobacco. By providing cheap cigarettes, the illegal industry encourages consumption on their unregulated and untaxed products. This damages public health and deprives governments and taxpayers of billions of dollars a year in lost revenue. Currently, for the ones who don't know, nearly a quarter, 25% of cigarettes consumed in the country are illegal. And upwards of 70% in some areas of Ontario. We were discussing here in the table, if Ontario would be a country, it would be the third country in the world with the highest incidence of illegal tobacco consumption. Okay? This is only to start the conversation around the illegal tobacco industry. Regulations like plain packaging, now being proposed in Canada, will not help. This is a law that removes all branding from the cigarette pack. This is a law. We know from Australia, which is a country that has this regulation, that this does not improve public health, as their government admits that smoking rates have not declined since they introduced plain packaging. We also know that plain packaging helps the illegal industry by forcing our products to look like theirs. This highlights the huge difference in price between taxed legal cigarettes and untaxed illegal ones. And with no branding to differentiate legal from illegal products, it is impossible for consumers, retailers, and law enforcement to identify legal versus illegal. Our government knows this, which is why they are not mandating plain packaging for marijuana. They also intend on keeping marijuana taxes low to squeeze out the black market. If these principles apply to marijuana, they also apply to tobacco. Our first challenge is to ensure that regulations encourage consumers to migrate away from unregulated cigarettes and to less risky next-generation products instead. On one of these next-generation products is called iGlow. This is what we were talking. I mean, we launched this product in the summer in British Columbia. We started a small test there. It hits and it not burn tobacco. So you put it's like a stick, it's like a tobacco stick. You put it into a device, and rather than burning the tobacco, it only hits the tobacco, so there's no combustion. The vast majority of the toxicants in cigarette emissions come from combustion. With no combustion, the result is far less toxicants. We will follow our iGlow launch with the introduction of our own electronic cigarettes, the so-called e-cigarettes, once the law that will legalize them is passed by Parliament. These are products that do not contain tobacco, but a simple liquid containing nicotine. There is a wealth of evidence that suggests that vaping products can have a beneficial impact on public health. Public Health England concludes that vaping is roughly 95% safer than cigarettes. The Royal College of Physicians and the University of Victoria Centre for Addictions Research are among many other organizations that agree with this statement. But these products will only succeed if we can tell consumers about the harm reduction potential. Regulation must allow us to do so and must permit products to be appealing to consumers. We believe that these less risky products can be the game changer that brings smoking rate down from its current 16% in Canada to the government objective of 5%. Imperial Tobacco Canada has every intention of working to make that happen, and we look forward to regulations that also support this goal. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.
When I was first asked to be part of today's event, there was a little bit of a preamble about what the subject matter was, and I basically said to Gordon, "You had me at tobacco." The reason being, I grew up on a tobacco farm in southwestern Ontario. I worked on the family farm for 5 years. My back still does ache when I hear that word, a la Stompin' Tom Connors. And then when I turned 16, I smartened up and got a job in radio. That's my backstory. But having worked in it and growing up in it, I've never smoked. I would, be a frequent attendee with my father at the auction process, which was always fascinating. That no longer exists. The industry has changed dramatically, as you are well aware, just from a growing standpoint. And yet in all, in 2009, the government bought out the marketing board system of tobacco, bought out all of the quota of the farmers. It's a similar system that the dairy industry, for example, has. And yet you drive down to southwestern Ontario, specifically in Brantford, you will see acres upon acres of tobacco being grown. So now, one question that I have for you is how much actually Canadian production of tobacco is used now in Canadian cigarettes? Because it used to be that anything grown and sold here had Canadian tobacco for flavor purposes, a lot of it for U.S. for filler. Is that all part of the changing dynamic? Because when I was growing up, tobacco was, at that time, again, being seen as this pariah industry, that it was almost... I joke about my youth to some extent. I don't want to idolize it in any way, shape, or form. Is that sort of the way it is right now?
Canadian tobacco is of very high quality, and we use it for the production of cigarettes, ourselves and the rest of the legal companies that operate in Canada. However, and unfortunately, the vast majority of the production now has been sort of deviated into this illegal market. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, 25% of the consumption of tobacco in Canada comes from the illegal market. And farmers are being held captive by these illegal industries and forced to supply them to produce their illegal tobacco. But we utilize Canadian tobacco.
A lot of it goes to the United States, I understand, too. You had some very interesting just baseline numbers of when we were discussing at dinner, or lunch rather, the legal price of a carton of cigarettes versus
Yes.
a black market, or if you go to a native reserve and buy a bag, a similar amount.
Yeah, if we would step down, there is a tobacconist right here in the street. You would pay roughly $107 for a carton of 200 cigarettes, a typical carton of cigarettes. You can get a baggie, a Ziploc, a plastic bag, with the same 200 cigarettes of lower quality, of course, for $15.
Yeah.
That's the asymmetry, and this is what explains the growth of illegal tobacco in Canada.
So when you hear of budgetary measures, for example, where they go after the easy target of sin taxes, yes, they want us to not use the product, certainly for health reasons, but is there a direct correlation soon thereafter in the numbers that you see from a sales standpoint from legal versus illegal production?
Yes, indeed. Every time authorities tend to shock the industry and apply hefty increases in taxation, there's a dramatic shift towards illegal tobacco, because prices have to go up. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, I mean, this is what explains that Canada rates so high in terms of illegal tobacco consumption. If we compare ourselves with south of the border, I mean, with the States, there's a significant difference in the rate of taxation. Tobacco consumption behaves exactly the same in terms of underlying decline of consumption, but there's no illegal industry. That's the difference. So I think authorities have to be very prudent. We believe in high taxation for tobacco. Don't take me wrong. We have to pay for the externality that we generate. But any exaggeration and its basic economic theory moves consumer into the black market. And actually, our Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, mentions that. I mean, he says there's no illegal industry in alcohol, in beer, because taxes are at a reasonable level. That's not the case of cigarettes. He mentioned, I'm quoting him. So it's an absolute reality, unfortunately.
So if you don't want people to smoke necessarily for health reasons, how do you, as a company that makes cigarettes, how do we get from here, where we're trying to reduce the number of the percentages? If you can't do it through necessarily taxation, you can't market your product per se. Is there are there technological advances, or what how are you transitioning?
Good question, huh? Good question. No, we have, very strong principles. First, we believe in the choice, in freedom of choice, in the capacity of adult consumers to decide what they consume. Okay, if tobacco is a legal product, they should be allowed to choose, and they should be allowed to have access to the products. Having said so, we strongly believe that by offering reduced risk products and being able to communicate this to consumers, and being able to have good quality products that are available out there, consumers will migrate. So what we're basically trying to do is migrate smokers from traditional cigarettes into these next generation vaping products in such a way that they have less risky options if they decide to consume. Okay? At the same time, we do each and every possible effort to keep the products away from minors, to keep the product away from any sort of communication in the case of cigarettes. I mean, if you enter to a store, you cannot see cigarettes.
No, that's true. But will there always be the skepticism that the tobacco industry brought on by itself through various health issues of the past and cover-ups and investigations, let's face it, that the consuming public is like, the tobacco industry, they're always going to have this cloud of smoke perhaps above. But you can't market, you said, to change perceptions. So how is that come through lobbying, where you have to go through the government channels to allow that, the sort of the rebuilding, and again to allow people to get off harmful cigarettes and onto, if in fact it is a healthier product?
We think, and we have a very progressive view. Two comments on your remark. First, we believe the future has to be very science-based. This is not about what I think or whomever thinks. This is about scientific evidence regarding harm reduction. Mm-hmm. So for the past few years, the industry has been investing billions in research and development in order to come up with reduced risk products. And it's not us saying it. I mean, this is the evidence coming from scientific publications. This is Health UK, Royal College of Physicians, some very highly credible universities who are driving independent studies on this. So as long as this is scientifically driven, we're happy to play. That's the first thing. If that is allowed, what we are asking the authorities, and this is being discussed at Parliament at the moment, the Bill S5, is that we need very clear product standards so that consumers can trust this product. We need to be able to inform consumers out there, to inform smokers of the characteristics of these new products. If we can tell them that these products are 95% safer than a cigarette, they might be willing to try and migrate. If we can't, I mean, we can come up with fantastic products, but they will never know. Consumer will not know, hence they will not migrate. And therefore, there's not a solution for something that the authorities in Canada want and what we want to support, which is this migration out of smoking.
Yeah,
it's impossible to do it without cooperation. I think the days where tobacco industry was not received by the government, the day where the industry was demonized, those days should be over. We're very open. And everything that I'm saying, you can enter into batscience.com and you will see all the research, all the studies, etc. It's a very open door and transparent policy, science-driven, and this is what we want to do.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too that the sale of a legal product, we're going to have marijuana sales starting next summer, and yet, no, we were talking earlier about vaping and e-cigarettes, and a lot of these things aren't even quote-unquote legal in the Canadian market, and yet I didn't know that. Again, I'm not a user of any of these products, so it's not necessarily on my radar, but I have a feeling a lot of people in the audience don't know necessarily what is and what isn't legal.
If vaping would be legal, believe me, we would be there. We're not. Vaping in Canada are selling liquid nicotine vaping products unless they are approved by Health Canada is illegal. So all the stores and all the products that you see out there are basically selling illegal products. This is why finally the Parliament decided to promote regulation on this. This is being discussed at Parliament, and we hope that sooner rather than later, products become legalized. The moment they become legalized, we will be in the market offering high-quality vaping products that are much less risky than cigarettes. But at the moment, they're all illegal. So we operate in a market which is very peculiar for a Latin. I'm Chilean, by the way. It's a market where 25% of cigarette consumption is illegal and is tolerated, and 100% of vaping consumption is illegal and is tolerated. So it's for me, it's incredible. I just don't get it. I hope we get some traction with the authorities and we manage to legalize this market, which is in the benefit of all consumers.
Does the upcoming legalization of marijuana, does that help or hinder the tobacco industry from a lobbying standpoint? And again, this message of, okay, you've got sort of a normalization of marijuana use. It's an inhaled product, for the most part, the smoking version. Can you use that to say and argue your case, or are they two different products that aren't, there is no crossover?
Yeah, I think they're two different products, but they should be treated similarly. At the moment, Bill C-45, which is the bill that intends to legalize marijuana, and as you mentioned, the objective is very ambitious to have it legalized by next summer. Government is basically advocating for lower taxes, is advocating for branding in the products, is advocating for keeping the products away from criminals and away from the hands of children, which we entirely agree with everything. I'm not saying that we agree with marijuana. Okay? I have enough controversy with tobacco, so I don't want to get into the marijuana thing. But all the principles are exactly the right principles in order to promote an industry. okay? And we agree with that. We think tobacco should be treated equally. Okay? Otherwise, we would be in a very contradictory environment whereby marijuana would have branded packaging, would be allowed to communicate certain things, will have lower taxes, and tobacco will be in unbranded packs, exactly as the illegal tobacco. We won't be able to communicate, and we will continue having absurd levels of taxation. So our message is only a call for consistency in the treatment of these two categories.
I was surprised that your company and the tobacco industry did not actually get involved with the formation of the legal marijuana industry. I mean, you're talking about a grown product into a smoke or, well, in some cases, edible format, but would there not be a tie-in between the two industries?
No, not for the time being. It's an industry that we don't know, we don't understand the product, we don't understand the science behind. And everything that we do is very science-based, so no, we're not interested, not close. Okay? We follow what's going on in terms of legislation, because of course we're advocating for a very consistent treatment of the two industries, if that is the case.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you had an interest in it, then would that not give you some inroads, I suppose, again, to argue your case about a standardized form of marketing, packaging, sales, the black market issue?
Yeah, I think we approach all this black market issue basically following the basics laws of economic and the government. I mean, again, Mr. Trudeau and the finance minister, they have been very vocal in saying that prohibition doesn't work, that draconian regulation in the case of marijuana would only continue keeping the product in the hands of the criminals and not in the hands of legal industry. So we see the analogy. Okay? We think that's our voice, okay? And this is what we're saying. We don't need to be part of the marijuana industry to actually advocate for very clear principles that I think benefit the society in general in Canada.
Where does Canada stand when it comes to the packaging issue for cigarettes? I'm not a smoker. I don't go to the United States specifically and search out how tobacco is sold there, for example. But are we at the forefront of countries that are really cracking down and trying to suppress tobacco sales? Or
yes. Canada sits always in the most, let's say, if you allow me the word, and with a lot of respect, it's a very hostile market for the industry in terms of regulation. So whomever is a smoker here and looks at the pack, it has a 75% warning. So 75% of a pack is a warning with a very nasty image, etc. And what is part of S5, which we oppose to, is the government wants to ban branding from packaging and basically make it, you will have the brand name, okay, on a dark pack, and from 75, okay, they will add another 25% warning, and that would be it. We oppose to that consistently and in a very firm way, because there's only one country that has experience with this plain packaging, which is Australia. They've been into plain packaging for the last 4 years, and for the first time, their government has acknowledged that tobacco consumption is not coming down in Australia. On the contrary, they see illegal tobacco growing, and consumption very stable. So we think it's a very ineffective measure that will only promote further growth of the illegal tobacco market. And by the way, if there's people from other industry here, this is also a trademark expropriation. This allows the government to take property away from you without paying. They will be removing the tobacco brands from a cigarette pack without paying a cent for that, which we think is absolutely illegal as well. So we oppose violently to that.
We have seen in very short order on a year-to-year basis huge changes within the tobacco and cigarette industry. Where are we in 5 years or 10 years out? Is it even? Do you see a transition happening? You'd like it to happen, but is it feasible? Is it, or do we continue to ward off people from cigarette use in the first place?
It's a very good question. I can share an example, which is Japan, which has very progressive regulation in tobacco. almost 18 months ago, Japan started with this introduction of what we call tobacco-heated products, which is what I recently mentioned. I mean, we launched in Vancouver this product called Glow, whereby you put a stick similar to a cigarette inside a device that heats the tobacco. It doesn't burn the tobacco. So it's very similar to vaping, but it's not vaping. It's tobacco that you put inside the machine, and then you smoke. In less than 2 years, that accounts for 30% of tobacco consumption in Japan, which is one of the biggest markets in the world. Mm-hmm. So there is a chance for this to work. What has happened there, well, the tobacco manufacturers are allowed to communicate, so they are communicating that this product is less harmful than cigarettes. There are very strict product standards that the industry has to comply with, which is what we want to happen in Canada, and taxation is reasonable in such a way that these products are affordable and consumers can pay for them. Okay? And again, in less than 2 years, 30% of the smokers moved into these less harmful products. Okay? We believe we can do that here in Canada, but in order to get to that sort of ground, in that sort of time, we need legislation. In the current legal framework, we believe it's absolutely impossible. I mean, we will do our best effort. We already started in Vancouver. We've been there for 2 months. Mm-hmm. We want to come into Ontario and to spread this across the country. As soon as the law enables us, we will launch the vaping products. But if regulation doesn't help, if we don't have this sort of cooperation and collaboration with the authorities, we believe this will be a very difficult enterprise. Very difficult.
Does the legalization of marijuana then, if in fact it is a successful rollout with a lower taxation level, because their objective is to keep mm-hmm. the black market out of it, now again it's going to be sold through individual stores operated by the LCBO, but does that help your case going forward to piggyback off that and say, look, it's working here, where you can keep the control of the usage and guide the consumer, so to speak?
Well, we hope that we get at least the legalization of vaping before the legalization of marijuana. If it doesn't happen, yeah, of course we will sort of look at the evolution of this market and continue expressing our views regarding what proper legislation. What kind of proper legislation is needed in Canada in order to migrate adult smokers into less harmful products. That's what we believe is the only solution. Mm-hmm. They can make tobacco illegal. Sometimes when I'm confronted by the tobacco control community, I sort of ask them back, well, what's your solution? Make us illegal. Mm-hmm. Why are you investing so much money from taxpayers in lobbying, in traveling, in anti-tobacco conference, et cetera, and never came up with a solution? Make us illegal.
Yeah, but then
that wouldn't be a solution. This is handling.
No, because then you get into.
But this is what they have been doing. I mean, yeah. the more regulation they put into the legal industry, they're basically moving this on a golden tray mm-hmm. into the illegal tobacco manufacturers. This is what has been happening mm-hmm. as regulation has becoming increasingly more restrictive in Canada, at federal level and at provincial level as well. Mm-hmm. Okay, the two levels is very, very complicated.
It is. Well, again, where I grew up, they bought out the farmers in 2009. There was on Labor Day weekend, there was the class action lawsuit settlement. I think it was 2008 or 9, I can't remember specific, but that weekend, going into a long weekend, Friday afternoon, the government announced that they were buying out the tobacco industry, the quota system. Why would they do it on a Friday afternoon? Well, your guess is as good as mine, but probably didn't get the media yes. coverage at the time it did. Having said that, the amount of tobacco that is grown now is quite substantial. It's based on a contract system. And I'm hearing just through friends and family that they're looking again at cracking down and trying to close down the production side of it. So do you think if that happens and you're not getting local production, and I don't exactly know how much it is that's used domestically in Canadian cigarette production specifically, but is that the first step maybe to, again, getting away from standard cigarettes and maybe toward
I think what has to be done is basically manage the demand side of it. I mean, the government has to facilitate the demand side of it, which is basically making consumers aware that there are less harmful products available. That will trigger it won't be a supply-driven movement, it will be a demand-driven movement. And for that, we need tobacco anyway. Okay, so then that pushes the supply. But what is essential, and we were talking behind the scenes, I mean, consumers didn't know about low-calories products until they started to be communicated. It's the same thing here. Consumers will not know about less risky nicotine products until they start to be communicated and until they trust them. And for that, you need very clear product standards, high quality, okay, not the sort of back of the garage kind of liquids that you put in a big machine. No, high quality products and very reasonable possibilities to communicate them.
I understand you're open to taking some questions.
Absolutely.
From the floor. So we have a roving microphone. If anyone has a question, up here in the front, Mr. McIver.
Sorry, I'll start out and. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'll just start out. I have a question, and it's something we didn't talk about at lunch. Obviously, we know now from the endless media reports over the last 6 months on legalization of marijuana that there's a lot more ways to consume marijuana than there is tobacco, right? You can drink it through a tea, or you can eat it.
This is what I've heard.
You can eat, yeah. So we know there's a lot more, but we also know that that for those that want to be more healthy, that are going to consume marijuana, they're at least what people are saying is that they probably won't smoke it; they'll consume it in some other way. My question, and you said you only dealt in science, and this isn't really a scientific question, it's more anecdotal, but my question is, we know that marijuana, whether you smoke it or consume it in another way, increases appetites, all types of appetites, sexual appetite, food appetite, it lowers inhibitions. I mean, that's a well-documented side effect of consuming marijuana. So if I was working for a tobacco company, it seems to me that, and I'm not trying to cast any aspersions, but it would seem to me that this would be opening up an enormous new demographic for smokers, that these people that are going to be consuming marijuana, that in fact it might well make them want to smoke or consume tobacco, and they wouldn't otherwise necessarily have done that. Do you put any credence in that at all? Is that something that anyone in your company has ever looked at all as a potential new market for tobacco?
No, not really. Okay, we know that a lot of consumers smoke tobacco and smoke marijuana. Okay, because marijuana is widely spread. Actually, there's more marijuana consumers than tobacco consumers, as far as we know. But the relationship between them and the effects on health of marijuana, we don't really know them. We do a lot in science with nicotine and tobacco. We don't know the effects of cannabis, so it would only be anecdotal. We don't have a position on that. I will never say never, but for the time being, no, we don't know. We don't really know.
Over here on.
My question is in regards to vaping. So in Bill S5, one of the provisions is a prohibition on letting consumers know or marketing to consumers that it's a safer product. Has the government given you justification on why they would prohibit that type of marketing or branding or that type of advertisement in regards to when vape products are legal?
Yeah, I think there's a very thin line between safe and less risky. What we are advocating for is at least to be able to inform consumers that these products are less harmful, that they contain less toxicants, significantly less toxicants than a cigarette, than a traditional cigarette, and we believe that's the right way to do it. Unfortunately, we face a very conservative approach of the tobacco control community, which is influencing regulation. So it's a debate that we're having at the moment. Okay, we're confident that our voice will be heard, and that we will be able to communicate a few things that will drive this shift from traditional cigarettes into these vaping products. Otherwise, why would you move if you're a smoker? You like your cigarette, you're happy smoking, etc., etc., etc. Unless there is a clear benefit, unless you understand that it's better for you, why would you move? If the legal industry is not allowed to do that, I think this will be a very slow and painful transition towards that. The products have to be good. The products need to have higher quality, and consumers need to know what's behind them. That's the essence of any industry. Okay? And we're advocating for that.
There's a question on this side.
Good afternoon, everyone. I work for a vape chain, 180 Smoke Vape Store, and I've noticed we've talked about cannabis, we've talked about tobacco, we've talked about e-cigarettes, but we haven't talked about the big pharma that sells NRT.
Sorry?
Now, big pharma that sells NRT products. And what kind of opinions are you seeing from them from where you sit? Are they supporting some of your causes? Are they going against you? We mostly see most opposition from big pharma as a vape chain. We don't see much opposition from tobacco or cannabis. And then nobody's talking about that. Maybe I want to hear your opinion on what you think.
First, I mean, we entirely support vaping. We are in this cause together, so we hope we can get good legislation because it will be great for you guys as retailers and good for us as manufacturers. And we have a very good relationship with farmers. This is we need leaf, we need tobacco anyway.
Big pharma.
Big pharma.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. We don't have a particular relationship with big pharma. We think they're not particularly happy with big tobacco, as they call us. Yeah, that's a bad name. We haven't been able to change that, but they see a threat. I think they see a threat from the industry because they have a business in smoking cessation. And several independent studies, including one from the University of Victoria in British Columbia, are acknowledging that vaping are much more effective cessation devices and products than what big pharma are actually providing. So I think that's the sort of competitor, and it's good to have competition, but we don't deal with that industry. Yeah? We don't have any sort of contact or communication. I think they have their own business, and I'm very happy that there are options for consumers who want to quit, which on the other hand proves that quitting is possible. Smoking is addictive, but addiction doesn't mean inability to quit, and they make a business out of that. We want to make a business out of the consumers who are moving from traditional cigarettes into vaping. We believe there's a lot of future there.
We have time for one more.
Quick question. So Bill S5 put some vague restrictions on advertising and promotion of vaping and harm reduction products. My question is, what kind of advertising restrictions are you supporting, and what kind of advertising restrictions do you oppose?
We will always support anything that keep the product away from the hands and the visibility of minors. That's a non-negotiable principle for us. We're not into that. And we would advocate for any sort of communication that will allow us and you guys to communicate the characteristics and quality standards of the product to consumers. That's basically our position.
Question over here.
Interested to hear your thoughts on, in terms of product standards. Would you believe, or do you agree that perhaps the biggest catalyst for a migration to reduced risk products would be reducing the amount of nicotine in combustible cigarettes to minimally or non-addictive levels like's been proposed by the US FDA?
Well, we welcome the initiative from the FDA in terms of regulating nicotine. In fact, in many markets there are nicotine ceilings for products, and we haven't seen that as a catalyst to migrate consumers from one category to the other one. We do believe that the biggest catalyst would be for the vaping industry to be able to claim that the products have much lower toxicants than cigarettes. I think that is what will trigger this migration in consumers. Okay? On what the FDA is trying to do, we support it. We welcome that. It's a very science-driven process. We also welcome that they have acknowledged the risk continuum, where they put cigarettes, then tobacco-heated products, and then vaping products. Anything that is science-driven, highly welcomed. But in terms of a catalyst, I think it's much more on what's the offer of vaping rather than what cigarettes are offering, because there's always this risk of the illegal market.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, excellent conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please welcome Deborah Glendinning to thank our speakers.
This has been a very important and enlightening dialogue, I think, for many of us. I'm not sure how many people truly understand the extent and magnitude of the issues and the challenges that this industry is facing and has faced for many, many years. And I think engaging in dialogues like this is critical to having the public better understand what is going on and the great work that people like Jorge and his executive team in BAT is doing to address things like the public health issue and to put products on the market that are going to deal with the demands of the public and the regulators. And it is evident the level of commitment that we've seen from the organization and from the executive team and Mr. Araya in particular. It's not like he doesn't have enough to do at the office, but he's committed to coming out and speaking to the public on these issues so people can understand the importance of the work that's being undertaken. And as Barbara said at the beginning, it's important that we listen. And the more we listen, the better we are able to communicate and get across the issues and achieve together what needs to be achieved in this industry. And I'm very proud to say that I know Mr. Araya personally, and I think he's done a tremendous job, and I think we should all appreciate the fact that he's put himself out there to be a champion of these issues, and it's something that's very important and I think will bear a lot of fruit in the future. So I wish him the best of luck in his continued talks. Thank you.
So I want to reiterate that, Mr. Araya, it was a very interesting talk, and I'm delighted that we welcomed you to the club today. I also want to thank Mike Eppel, who gave us his time and chaired the discussion with Mr. Araya. That was wonderful, and we hope we'll see you back at our club again, Mr. Eppel. I also want to thank our sponsors, Osler, Hoskins, and Harcourt, for making this event possible. Without sponsors like these great companies, the Empire Club lunches would not be possible. So thank you once again for your very generous support. We would also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, for live webcasting today's event to thousands of viewers around the world. Although our club has been around since 1903, we have moved into the 21st century, and we're active on social media. Please follow us on Twitter at Empire_Club and visit us online at www.empireclub.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on Instagram. Finally, please join us again soon at our next event on October the 12th, the Honourable Melanie Joly, Minister of Canadian Heritage, and we'll be here at 1 King West. Thank you for your attendance, and this meeting is now adjourned.